Do you have a ridiculously picky eater at home? Is it beyond picky eating and it's more like anxiety? Then we should talk. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about what that is and how to help it. A lot of anxious kids have eating issues. They have sleeping issues, eating issues, and school issues. That is kind of like the areas that tend to get affected. But eating is what we're going to talk about today. And unfortunately, I know this like way too well because 2 of my 3 kids have had anxiety around eating. And it is completely scary because when your child stops eating because of anxiety, it's kind of a life or death feeling. People don't always get anxiety and feeding issues, and this drives me nuts because people in important positions like pediatricians or even, friends and relatives do not get that. And even sometimes speech therapists or other professionals don't understand the level of anxiety around eating. So you want to be careful because I've had multiple pediatricians tell me, oh, Miss Daniels, don't worry about it. Kids don't starve to death. And then I've watched my oldest child, when she was younger, fall off the growth scale to the point where she was failure to thrive because of her feeding issues, until I finally ignored the pediatrician and I went out and got my own feeding therapist and realized, no, she has a legitimate anxiety around eating and she can starve to death. It's so annoying. So you're not alone. If you're watching this and you're like, my child is not going to eat and it's not a power thing. It's not like I just need to force them to eat or I'm accommodating them by letting them eat whatever they want. No. Anxious eating is a serious issue and it's not your fault and it is a thing. So let's talk about how you deal with it. For starters, you want to find out what is causing your child's refusal to eat. Most of the time, it can center around sensitive tongues. Anxious kids tend to be sensitive, more sensitive all over. And a lot of times their tongues are more sensitive. And so they're really nervous about having a different taste or texture in their mouth. So sometimes it's an oral defensiveness, like it's a sensory thing. And other times it's just an anxiety where they like to know what's going to be happening in life and in their mouth. It's so true. And so some anxious kids will say, I just don't know what it's going to taste like. I'm not sure if I'm going to like it, or I'm not sure if it's going to be too hot or too cold or too lumpy. And so you can tell them, here is a paper towel and you can spit it into the paper towel if you want. Here is some milk if it's, a taste that you don't like, or some water. So give them some coping mechanisms around tasting new food. Nothing is going to be a silver bullet, but that can kind of help. Sometimes if you have an anxious kid or a child with OCD, it could be in their thinking that's causing them not to eat. Sometimes an anxiety theme is manifested in eating, and that's so scary when that happens. I'll give you 2 examples. So I've worked with kids who are actually afraid to poop. We covered that in my podcast on fear of pooping for all ages, because that does exist. So older kids realize that they're going to poop when they eat. And when they make that connection, they just decide, okay, well, because I'm afraid of pooping, which is a thing, then I'm not going to eat. Therefore, they stop eating, which is scary. Now, some kids with OCD will develop weird rules around eating, and you have to kind of get into their brain and figure out what that is. I'll give you an example. So recently, like in the last few months, my son, who's 7, developed an OCD intrusive thought that said, this food was once alive. And it started off with a kind of a normal conversation of like, what are we eating? We're eating bacon. Yeah, but what was it before that? It was a pig. And then I had no idea that that was actually starting to balloon into an intrusive thought. Because every day we'd sit down for dinner. What are we eating? Chicken. You mean like bok bok chicken? Yeah. You mean like chicken with feathers and a family? But then I'm laughing, but it's really not even that funny, because then it ballooned out into other things. Like, what are we eating? Salad. Oh, a plant? Yes. Are plants alive? Well, kind of. We're eating something that was alive. Does it hurt when we pull out plants from the ground? Now, it sounds like my child's a really kind-hearted kid, and he is, but he's having some OCD intrusive thoughts, and he has stopped eating completely. because now it doesn't matter if it's a Cheeto. A Cheeto was never alive, but he's still afraid to eat. So that's scary. So find out with your child, what is the anxiety around it? Most of the time it's going to be maybe the texture or the taste, but for a lot of anxious kids, it could be some sort of rule or germ-related issue or food poisoning issue that maybe is out of the scope of what you're actually thinking is picky eating. Once you find out what the cause of this picky eating is, that goes beyond just taste and flavor, then you want to tackle the thought. So with my son, we've been tackling his worry cloud, and his worry cloud is telling him to think that the food is alive when he eats it, and we've been tackling his thoughts and reframing his thinking. So do that for your child. If your child is worried about the taste, which is a very big reason that a lot of anxious kids stop eating, get out a piece of paper with them. Sit down and make a go-to food list. This is what I do with kids all the time. It's what I've had to do with my 2 kids, 2 out of my 3. My third one, thank goodness, knock on wood, she's eating for now. She's the only one in the house that's eating. Well, I eat a lot, but out of my kids, actually my husband's even picky. So like he probably needs to see a therapist. He would not like me to say that. So make a go-to list of all the foods. A lot of times you'll be surprised at how many foods they'll actually eat. And this is important because you want to start with their go-to foods and build off that. And I'm not a feeding therapist, and if your child is really not eating, you should probably go seek out a feeding therapist. A lot of times those are speech therapists with a feeding specialty, and they could be amazing to have and can give you a lot of food ideas, because there's a whole world out there of just feeding therapy. Google it and you'll probably find tons of feeding articles. But this is just a quick video to kind of get you started about how to think about anxiety and eating. So make your long go-to list and stock up on that. I let my kids graze all the time because my son, just to get any kind of calorie or any food in his mouth is a miracle because of his thoughts. So I have food available for him 24/7. Whenever he wants to eat it, I'm shoving food in his mouth. So get the go-to list that can open up your child's eyes to what foods they actually are willing to eat. And then I always put something extra at dinner next to their go-to food, not on the same plate, because anxious kids don't like their food touching. And then maybe not even with the same fork, because my kids require multiple forks for different food. And not because they're difficult and not because I accommodate or enable them. I hate when people say that about parents, but because they truly won't eat things if their food is touching. So put your regular meal maybe on a plate next to it so that they can at least explore it, maybe they'll taste it. I don't think that it's very helpful to force kids to eat food when they're having anxiety, or to put pressure on them and to say, you need to clear your plate or you can't leave the table. Good luck with that, because I've had 13 years of eating issues. That does not help. You want to meet them where they're at. You want them to feel empowered, and you want them to feel like it's their choice. It's not an entitled bratty kid, it's a kid with anxiety. And kids with anxiety don't do well with pressure or with consequence related to their anxiety. You wouldn't either. If you were afraid of bees and I said you have to go in and grab some honey off of a beehive, I don't know, that was just a really weird example. You're going to be like, no. Actually, I think most people would probably be like, no. But in general, anxiety doesn't work well with pressure. So you want to take the pressure off. You want to create a calm environment. You want to find out what's at the heart of their anxiety around eating. You want to tackle their cognitive distortions, tackle the thoughts that are around it, make a go-to list, and then provide whatever everybody else is eating next to their go-to food. That should get you started. I'm sure there's a million other things I could talk about related to food, and I will, because I'm going to make that my next podcast episode. So if you're not listening to my podcast, go check that out at the AT Parenting Survival Podcast on iTunes, and you will find a whole 30-minute conversation about this topic as well, because this is a passion of mine right now because I'm living it. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do, because every Thursday I'm going to be coming out with new videos on topics like this and other topics related to parenting, anxiety, and OCD. I would hate for you to miss them, so hit subscribe. If you have a comment on how you get your kids to eat, please leave it below, because we're a community and we should all help each other. Parents have the most creative ideas, and so share with other people and leave a comment. I hope you're having an amazing week, and I will talk to you next week. Until then, I hope you find the sparkle in every day. Take care.